also he brought the intangible elements or the non-quote-unquote football elements to this thing that I think were absolutely critical to the success of the Montana Grizzlies this year.
It's a good choice, and you could see exactly how much better Montana was with. Here's the thing: Cam Humphrey was good, and he helped Montana to 2 big wins over Eastern Washington and Portland State. He looked particularly good against Portland State, but when it started going awry against Idaho, they needed Dalton Sneed, and you could see what Dalton Sneed meant to Montana, not only from a skill perspective and an athleticism perspective, but also just from a leadership perspective. When he came in that Idaho game, he really guided them, and even with not really being able to
do everything,
do all of the things that he has in his tool bag, he still was able to. He still led them down the stretch. But my offensive MVP for the Grizz is Samori Toure, and the reason I chose Toure over Sneed, I think Sneed was Montana's most important player, but Toure was available for every game, which was not the case for all the rest of the receivers. Jerry Lou McGee played every game, but he was taken out and didn't have any statistics in a couple of the conference games. Sammy Kim, as we know, missed the stretch run. Gabe Sulcer was not available the second half of the season. And the one consistent guy in the passing game was Samori Toure. And I picked Toure because of just the historical nature of his numbers. I mean, he finished with 87 catches for 1,495 yards. The 1,495 breaks Mark Mariani's single-season record.
Amazing.
He had a couple of the biggest games I've ever seen, including breaking Randy Moss's record.
He had the biggest game ever in the history of the university. So, yes. Absolutely.
I mean, it was one of the great days. I mean, I couldn't believe that Southeastern Louisiana just sat there in man coverage and let him feast, but 300 and some odd yards and 3 touchdowns later, the numbers are huge, and it sets the stage for a great senior year. But I also think that he deserves a ton of credit because receivers are always kind of pinned as prima donnas, but that was definitely the case under Bob Stitt. They were recruited to put up big numbers early, and this whole core of guys did early. And when Bobby Howe came in, he directly challenged so many of these guys with position battles. And the number one position battle I thought of the offseason was the way that the coaches, Bobby Houck and Brent Pease mainly, pitted Mitch Roberts against Samori Toure. And I thought that helped Roberts improve to the point where he was a solid contributor this year, but also it spurred Toure on to being a first-team All-American.
No doubt. And Toure was completely outstanding. I mean, just as good as it gets. My defensive MVP, Coulter, I mean, I know you got somebody else for the sake of conversation, but I'm not just going to mess around with this. It's Dante Olson. I mean, 179 tackles, 11 TFL, interception, a fumble recovery, 2 forced fumbles, and also the eye test, just watching him do what he does. And I understand the system is set up to have him and guys like Jace Lewis and Robbie Howe be the guys who rack up these gaudy numbers, but he also was a tone setter. His attitude on defense, his strength, and his impact both physically and then sort of not metaphorically but emotionally as well on this team. A huge leader, obviously a Buck Buchanan finalist for a second year in a row. He is the best player on the defense. He's my defensive MVP.
Definitely one of the best linebackers, not only this decade at Montana, but this decade in the Big Sky Conference. One of the greatest linebackers in the history of the Big Sky Conference. Yeah. I mean, he broke Montana's single-season tackles record 2 years in a row, broke the career tackles record despite only being a 2-year starter. And Craig Haley just put out his all-FCS team of the decade, and Dante Olson was on that team, justifiably so.
Yeah.
Just to be contrarian and to have a discussion, I picked Jace Lewis coming into this game. Into this year. Dante Olson had the biggest bullseye on his back of anybody in the Big Sky Conference. Everybody knew the production he was going to chase once again. And Jace Lewis went out and outproduced Josh Buss, outproduced a lot of other guys that had played next to Olson previously. I mean, Jace Lewis was their most important player a lot of times because teams were scheming to run away from Dante Olson. And Lewis was the guy that had to really pick up the slack. But I thought that all the stuff that Lewis can do in terms of playing on the weak side linebacker, but as well as blitzing, rushing the passer, it was the key to Montana being able to do a lot of the stuff they did on defense. And I thought he had a great year.
We also wanted to pick a breakout player. Jace Lewis very well could have been the breakout player of the year. To me, I selected Marcus Knight. He comes in, never played in the Big Sky Conference, comes in out of a junior college, and ends up going over 1,000 yards rushing. He's just the 13th player in UM history to go over 1,000 yards. He also had 277 yards receiving, and the touchdowns. I mean, at the end of the day, what's the point of the game? Get the thing across the line. 23 rushing touchdowns, added 2 receiving touchdowns, a total of 25. That's 150 points that he was responsible for this season as a touchdown scorer. He passes Chase Reynolds on the all-time list in all 3 of those categories: touchdowns, points scored, etc. Now, look, nobody's going to sit here and argue that. I think at this point, Marcus Knight is a better running back or something like that than some of the great running backs who have come through the University of Montana. Right. But what he was and what he was to this team and what they did not have last season. I mean, we'll talk about the drastic improvement that Montana made from year 1 under Bobby Hauck to year 2. He was a huge part of that. They had a guy who they could rely on to make plays out of the backfield, to pick up a couple of yards if you needed them, and also he just had a knack to get to the end zone. And a couple of his highlight reel plays are all-timers. I mean, he's not great, not elite in any one quote-unquote skill of running the ball, top-end speed, tremendously quick, moves, balance, but he's really good in all of them. And when he put some of that stuff together, he was outstanding. So he is my breakout player of the year for the Montana Grizzlies.
I mean, to break Chase Reynolds' record, it's pretty crazy that you're not the front runner to be the offensive MVP of the team.
Right.
But he, to me, this is how good Montana's offense was, but also some statistics are circumstantial.
His numbers are skewed in his favor.
Marcus Knight stole a lot of touchdowns from Sammy Akem, stole a lot of touchdowns from Mitch Roberts. I mean, Mitch Roberts got tackled inside the 5-yard line, 5 times?
Yeah.
And he scored 1 touchdown. He had that touchdown in the playoffs.
Mitch Roberts, by the way, was also on my list for that spot.
Oh, Mitch Roberts had a great year. 37 catches, 420 yards, and that touchdown. But when he caught that touchdown in the playoffs, the press box announced,
"This is his first touchdown."
This is his first touchdown. We're like, really?
Right.
Last couple of years, hasn't he? He almost scored a bunch. And Marcus Knight got a lot of those touchdowns. It's not anything to take away from Marcus Knight.
Of course not.
I thought that this year's Grizz, it was interesting because if you look at the rushing statistics, they actually rushed for 30 yards a game less. They averaged a full yard per carry less on the ground. I think a lot of that was the fact that Dalton Snead was hurt, but also the fact that they just didn't run him at the prevalence that they did a year ago. Montana had some pretty skewed rushing totals a year ago because of huge games that Snead had, which weren't necessarily indicative of Montana's ability to run the ball. They were indicative of Snead's ability to run the ball.
Right.
But make no mistake, I think that coming into this year, there was a huge question mark at running back because I think that we kind of all knew that Adam Eastwood could only be a rotation guy, not a feature back. And who else is going to step up? No more Jeremy Calhoun, even though he never really got a shot with this coaching staff. No more Elijah Lee, even though he never really got a shot with this coaching staff. Where are you going to turn? And I thought that Marcus Knight combined with Nick Osmo really helped buoy the run game. And I still think it's a place that Montana has to really improve on. I think that it was a twofold sense of improvement. We thought they were better because they were. You could just see that the players on the offensive line were better, but also they just sometimes didn't play. Like Eastern Washington wasn't as good this year, so being able to run the ball against Eastern this year compared to last year, even though they didn't play Eastern last year, it's just not quite the same. I thought Montana benefited from. I guess what I'm saying is to truly prove improvement to me, you have to do it against the best teams, and Montana still had a really hard time running the ball against the better teams. So that's somewhere I think they really need to grow in the offseason. But make no mistake, the fact that Marcus Knight's only a sophomore, that's huge for Montana.
Huge. And, I mean, you talk about Nick Osmo and, some of the younger guys that they have coming up. I mean, Levi Janicaro, what could he be? Garrett Graves, what could he be? I think there's certainly cause for optimism in that spot. But he was the breakout guy for me. Who was yours?
Marcus Knight.
You had Marcus Knight
as well.
Okay.
We didn't compare notes on this. I knew you were going to pick Snead and Olsen, so I wanted to highlight other guys.
Right.
I thought the historic nature of Toure garnered recognition, but I had Marcus Knight as well. And, if I was to have to pick a second guy, I'm not sure who
I would have picked Jace Lewis, but you had him as the defensive MVP. So
I think probably the other breakout guy that I really considered was Patrick O'Connell because he's a guy that went from this guy wasn't even recruited by the Grizz out of high school. He basically recruited himself after spending a year at the University of Mary, and he is such a quintessential Bobby Hauck guy. He comes in and they think, okay, this guy's a pretty good player. He's not going to get much time behind Dante Olson, Jace Lewis, and Marcus Wellnow, who's a guy I think that the way that Lewis kind of broke out last year, I think Wellnow has a chance to kind of be that guy next year. He's a really good player. But the coaches, they thought, okay, well, this guy's probably our fourth best inside linebacker, but he's probably still one of our best 12 or 13 defensive players. Let's figure something out. And they started playing him at that Reb position, and he was really good.
Stu Tell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, the Montana Football Hour, presented by Lithia Ford. We continue in it now. We go to Montana State, Coulter, offensive, defensive MVPs. I'm very interested in this because we have not talked about this at all in terms of who we picked. My offensive MVP, I hope you're proud of me. I hope you're proud of me, Coulter, for this.
Yeah.
Mitch Brott.
Yeah, me too.
Is my offensive MVP. And I want to pick Travis Johnson on this in a certain way. Travis Johnson is the best athlete on the team probably, and was absolutely critical with no Troy Anderson, with no Isaiah Ifanse, to what this team had to be able to do and what they accomplished on the ground. But make no mistake, it's the offensive line, and as a symbolic tip of the cap to the anchor of the offensive line, but the group in general, it's Mitch Brott. I mean, they rushed the Montana State Bobcats for 3,871 yards. Their opponents against them rushed for 1,818 yards. They rushed, are you ready, for 2,000 more yards than the teams that they played against. Now, I don't understand this is an absolute run-first team, but, I mean, to more than double up your opponent for a season is remarkable, and especially when, quite frankly, for 3/4 of the season, everyone knew it was coming. Everyone knew it was coming. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about what Montana State is doing. Now, how they would go about it, I thought they were creative in their run game by and large. Sometimes I thought it was a little gimmicky, but a lot of times I just thought it was creative. But also a lot of times it was just line up and let Mitch Brott and the rest of everybody bulldoze anyone out of the way. And the production that they had there to rush for more yards, not just total, but in average, than a triple option running football team, remarkable. So it's Mitch Brott to me.
I think the biggest praise you could give Matt Miller, Montana State offensive coordinator, as well as Brian Armstrong, honestly, the offensive line coach who's the run game coordinator, is the way that all the different elements of the run game coalesced into going from, you're not wrong when you say sort of gimmicky, to unstoppable. Well, they implemented new factors each week. Mm-hmm. And then as they all came together, then the last month of the season, all of a sudden the jet sweep, the fly sweep, the Wildcat quarterback, it's not a gimmick because now you really can run all of it, and you got defenses head spinning, and that's how you rush for 390 yards against the number 3 team in the country like they did in the Cat Grizz game. So Mitch Brott, I mean, it has to be made note of that the guy started 50 straight games.
It's amazing.
We've talked a lot about the degradation of talent at the offensive line in terms of Montana recruits. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that the University of Montana has not had the same Montana-born and bred guys anchoring their offensive line like they have in recent years. But when you look at Montana State's left tackle position, I'm putting together my all-decade teams right now.
Yeah.
Montana State has had 3 guys that started at left tackle. Mike Person, his senior year in 2010. John Widenauer for 49 straight games. Mitch Brott for 50 straight games.
It's amazing.
The all-decade team was pretty easy.
Yeah.
Those 2 guys, Widenauer and Brott. I mean, obviously, Person will be on the last decade all-decade team, but there's no other competition. Right. They're the guys. And so impressive by Mitch Brott. I'll tell you this. It's late enough now that we can say this. Jeff Choate nominated Mitch Brott as his team's MVP in terms of the Big Sky Conference. That was the Montana State's offensive MVP, and I think that's cool. I think Mitch Brott deserves that.
Defensive MVP, Coulter, I picked, a guy who is not the best player, but a guy who I think is the most important player and the most impactful player, and that, to me, was Braden Conkle. I picked Braden Conkle because he's second on the team in tackles. He didn't play even at his own best all the time. He had some times where he wasn't the best player on his own defense, but also even for his own self. But he also did play outstanding football at times. In a national quarterfinal, he had 1 interception, should have really had 2. But also, to me, this defense had a lot of great players on it, but it was about the buy-in and about the attitude. And to me, he's a leader on that team, and he raised the level of everybody around him. And I thought just the way that he impacted those guys, like Bryce Sterk, Derek Marks, those are great football players and could both be the defensive MVPs. But they're also not the guys who go in and light up the unit in terms of getting them ready to go. Braden Conkle is that guy. And so to me, he's the defensive MVP from taking it kind of in a holistic sense.
And I think that this is why it's so essential that you watch games and that you watch games live, to especially when you're evaluating defensive guys. Because so often, to me, the evaluation of defense goes so far beyond stats. What is your job in the scheme, and what does your team ask you to do? And you look at Braden Conkle, he led Montana State in tackles the 2 years leading up to his senior year. He had about half as many tackles this year. Is that because Braden Conkle was worse? Absolutely not. It's because Montana State got so much better up front. I mean, Conkle said it after, I can't remember if it was the second round win over Albany or the quarterfinal win. I think it was over Austin Peay. He said, sometimes playing my safety spot, Montana State played a lot of big nickel this year where they got Jacquay Allen and JoJo Henderson on the field at safety, and they played Conkle up in the box. He got some action then, but when he's playing the true roaming safety spot, like he said, sometimes it's just kind of boring.
No doubt.
I mean, because Montana State, they had 4 defensive linemen that had 50-plus tackles. That's an unheard of number. You don't see that. 4 different guys, 50, 55, even as many as 60 tackles.
2 minutes.
So I think that's a good choice. I think the biggest testament you could say to Jeff Choate and his staff and the Bobcat squad is that you could think of no less than half a dozen guys on offense for MVP and no less than half a dozen guys on defense for the MVP. And that's what he said all year. He gets asked about Troy Anderson every week, justifiably so. But he said, guys, Troy, no Troy, it doesn't matter. This is a team.
So who's yours?
And I got Derek Marks as mine because Derek Marks was, I mean, for being a 250-pound guy, played on the interior of the defensive line, his production was absurd. I mean, he had 16 tackles for loss playing as an interior defensive lineman. Mm-hmm. But if you know what Montana State does, all the coaches in the league talked about how hard it is to scheme for the movement and the stunting and all that stuff. Montana State, they do that almost ad lib, and it's Marks that feels it out and then says, all right, Sterk, Amandre Williams, you guys go here, you guys go here. We're going to take advantage here. And I just thought that Montana State's defensive line played at an unbelievably high level, especially the last 6 games of the year. I thought Derek Marks was absolutely the catalyst of it.
Breakout player.
I got 2.
Okay.
I just went Logan Jones on offense, Josh Hill on defense. These are 2 guys from Kalispell Glacier who their careers were in a state of flux last year. They were supposed to be their senior years last year. Logan Jones tore his abdomen. He ends up playing 4 games, but then shutting it down under the hope of having a better year, and then he did. He almost rushed for 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. I thought he really looked like a feature back in place of Isaiah Afonso, which is something that people that watched him in high school knew he had the potential, but he could never quite get there, and he did in his 5th year. That's pretty impressive. But you can't understate how amazing the Josh Hill story really is. I mean, the guy had back surgery, and it was questionable if he was ever going to be able to really move functionally, let alone do high-level sports, and then he comes all the way back, and not only does he come all the way back, he's first-team All-Big Sky. That kid alone, being first-team All-Big Sky as a 6-foot, 210-pounder, is amazing. Coming off that injury, it's unheard of. And so I thought that both those guys, they really finished their careers in style.
Josh Hill was great. I also selected Logan Jones. 97.5 all-purpose yards, led the team in that category. Had 9 total touchdowns, 8 rushing, 1 receiving. As you mentioned, tied with Travis Johnson. And when you lose Troy Anderson and Isaiah Afonso, and then you are able to turn to a kid who, like you said, goes almost for 1,000 yards, remarkable, and to have a breakout season in your senior year, outstanding for Logan Jones that way. Stu Tell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. It's the Montana Football Hour. We'll take a break, and we'll review the biggest moments for these 2 teams, the Montana Grizzlies and Montana State Bobcats on the season. What were they, and what impact did they have? We'll tell you right after this. By the way, quick update from the Music City Bowl. When we left you, it was 14-10 Mississippi State. Louisville has now scored twice. It's 24-14 Cardinal, including a defensive scoop and score in the last possession for Louisville. So they are now up 10. Montana Football Hour is presented by Lithia Ford of Missoula. We appreciate them for being a part of this as well. Hey, you want to have a good time? Go down to the Silver Slipper. It's all about great food, tasty beverages, and their urge to enjoy themselves. Whether you're looking for an affordable family meal or a late-night game of poker, the Silver Slipper has what you're looking for. Right now, Silver Slipper is your football headquarters. 56 TVs to watch sports on, drink specials every single day, full liquor store, and Tarantino's Pizzeria. The Silver Slipper has all you need to watch your favorite games and the friendliest staff in town. Celebrate New Year's Eve tomorrow at the Silver Slipper. It's a roaring 20s party. Entry is free. The DJ starts at 9 o'clock with champagne toast at midnight. Don your best zoot suit or flapper dress, and you can enter to win best dress. Visit thesilverslipperlounge.com for more info. Stop by today and see why the Silver Slipper is one of Montana's best-kept secrets across the street from Walmart on Brooks.
Alpine Touch is legendary around the state of Montana for providing delicious seasonings for every grilling occasion. Now, Alpine Touch offers so much more, from a savory new barbecue sauce to spicy pepper blends to tasty barbecue rubs. In addition to the classic, Alpine Touch has a variety of seasoning salts for whatever you need to spice up. Now that the holidays are over, Alpine Touch makes a perfect thank you gift to show your friends and relatives you love them. Alpine Touch, available at retail locations around Montana or online at alpinetouch.com. Alpine Touch, Montana's special spice.
'Tis the season for a festive holiday feast at the Montana Club with mouth-watering dishes like our cranberry brie walnut tarts and pork Diane, or savor our Chardonnay salmon or blackened shrimp fillet. Be sure to wrap up your celebration with our decadent pecan rum raisin cake, all available for a limited time only through January 5th. See the full menu at montanaclub.com. Happy holidays from all of us at the Montana Club on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, ooh, pump it up.
Hey, what a great idea. I'll stop by Town Pump and pick up some Pepsi and Mountain Dew to bring home to the family. 1 liters are buy two, get one free. And 12-pack Pepsi products are only $4.99. Town Pump, quick, easy, and right down the road.
Town Pump, right down the road. Pump it up. Oh, yeah.
Hi there, it's Les Schwab Tires. Well, more like Les Schwab alignment and brakes and shocks and wheels and tires. Now, some tire places don't offer all that. They only sell tires. And we're not sure how they sleep at night, because all those services affect things like steering and stopping. That's why we offer more than tires to help keep you safe. Stop by or book an appointment at leschwab.com. Les Schwab Tires, doing the right thing since 1952.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
In Western Montana, we know shopping local matters, and you may think you'd pay more for the quality and customer service that comes with it, but not at Selway Armory. Selway Armory is locally owned with knowledgeable specialists that can answer your questions. In addition to the expertise, though, Selway Armory also has a bigger selection and lower prices than the box stores. When you're in the market for firearms and accessories, save money with the experts at Selway Armory. Selway Armory, 2825 Stockyard Road, Unit E6, and online at selwayarmory.com.
Hey there, Colter Nuanez from your favorite daily sports talk show, Two Tell Nuanez. I'm here with Tom from Aspen Sound. Tom, last winter I got a sweet car starter. It's something I think everybody needs.
You know, Colter, I couldn't agree more, and my wife sure thinks so too. We've got a lot of sweet deals. We actually have it capable now where you can start it from your phone from anywhere you'd like. We have two-way remotes that'll confirm to you the vehicle started, all the way down to our basic package starting at just $299 installed. Come on in and check us out.
Feel the music at Aspen Sound.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon. Ryan Tutel, Colton Nuanez. Here's some sports news for you. The Montana Grizzly men's and women's hoops teams are 1-0 in conference play after beating Northern Arizona in nearly identical fashion Saturday. The men, playing at Dahlberg Arena, were down 8 in the second half before riding a 15-2 run to a 6-point lead and ultimately coming away with a 79-72 victory. Senior Saeed Bridget led the way with 27, while Kendall Manuel added 16. The Grizz host Sac State tonight. Game 2 of the conference slate tips off at 7 o'clock.
Lady Grizz, playing on the road in Flagstaff, opened up with a 15-3 run to start the game and finished off a win over Northern Arizona 79-72. That's crazy. Same score.
Yeah.
Senior guard Mackenzie Johnson led the way for Montana, going 8 of 11 from the field to finish with 25 points, while sophomore Abby Anderson added 15 points. Lady Grizz play the manic Sac State Hornets tonight on the road.
Montana State also got off on the right foot, with the men earning a convincing 66-51 win over Sac State in Bozeman Saturday. Harold Frey and Jabril Bello both scored 18 points, while MSU held the Hornets to under 35% from the field. The Cats host NAU tonight.
Montana State women were the most dominant of all and they put the hammer down on Sac State on the road, 85-48. 9 players scored for the Lady Cats, led by 23 from Martha Kuderer. MSU plays in Flagstaff this NAU tonight.
This ESPN Missoula Sports Center is brought to you by Aspen Sound.
And in the interest of accuracy, the Lady Grids actually won 79-71. I miswrote it. My mistake. So the Grids, they both scored 79 points. How about that? In their conference openers against the same schools, Northern Arizona. The men won 79-72. The Lady Grids won 79-71 in Flagstaff. Impressive. Mackenzie Johnston, man, 8 of 11 for 25 big time. So, talk some more basketball later on. But it's the Montana Football Hour, presented by Lithia Ford of Missoula. It's Tutel Nuanez, broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, online at kurtzpolaris.com. You want to find us on the Instagram? Go ahead, at Gus Tutel. No, at R Tutel. Is that what I am on Instagram?
I don't know. Me
either. At 1029 and at Colton Nuanez, at C Nuanez on Instagram. Okay, that's good. At 1029 ESPN is the important one. That's where all the action is, after all. Coulter, let's continue on the Montana Football Hour. We talked about our offensive, defensive, and breakout MVPs and a breakout player for both Montana and Montana State in the first segment. Now I want to go through and talk about the most impactful moments for the Grizzly Cats. Now, I don't know if you did the three. You did Montana State. I did Montana.
Yep.
And so we can go back and forth one-on-one. But I didn't do the 3 quote-unquote best moments. I did the 3 most impactful moments, 2 of which were positives for Montana. But I'll start with this for the Grizzlies. This is broad. This wasn't a moment per se, but breaking the barrier and getting back into the playoffs. And not just getting back into the playoffs, but getting in with a bye and a number 6 seed and hosting a game. Absolutely huge for the Grizzlies and a huge moment of reemergence. And again, if you take this on a broad stroke, this is a team that was not in the playoff year. They were not good enough to make the playoffs last year. And this year, they're the number 6 team in the nation going into the playoffs with them. That is a huge and drastic leap forward. And even though it's something that is expected at the University of Montana, if this happened at any other program, people would be like, unbelievable. Look at the jump that this team made from one year to the next. And guess what? Montana did make that jump. And it was one that they desperately needed to make. And I think this is more than just the football team. I think this is a university-wide, a community-wide, a statewide buoying of the program to get back to a level that it has been at for a long time, but also hasn't been at in the recent past. And so to reattain not just the entrance into the playoff, but a nationally prominent level of entrance into the postseason, where it was a foregone conclusion before the year ended that Montana was going to be in the postseason, was dramatic and important for this team. And I think that this group, for this senior group, that's the legacy that they leave with the University of Montana to me. So that is, again, a program sort of sized impact moment to me for Montana.
Well, it's going to be the never-ending storyline until it isn't. Just the looming tradition and unparalleled success that Montana had for such a long stretch. Yep. I found it quite interesting. There's so many things you can start to reflect on. I think that the 20th century, the decades were so defined, and people recognized the decades as they progressed. And when it became the 90s, you reflected on the 80s right away. But because it's sort of this, there was no way to really define the first 20 years of the 21st century. And so I feel like that nostalgia and retrospective thinking is only now starting to come into play, because really no one knew what to think of the aughts. Now it's kind of like, we got through the second round of the teens in terms of modern history, where now we're into the 20s.
Yeah.
But one of the most reflective parts about this is thinking about the University of Montana football program and just how far in the past it actually is that Montana was elite. Mm-hmm. The last time they were as good as they were this year was 2011. The last time they officially were as good as they were this year was 2009. That's a long time.
Yeah, it is.
Especially in the scope of college athletics. Yep. And so I think that getting back to this point, was good, but Stats FCS put out their top 15 programs of the decade. Montana was not one of them. Mm-hmm. That's insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's multiple FCS programs that didn't exist 10 years ago. They were on the list, and Montana's not. It puts into perspective that Montana needs to fix this now.
Yeah.
Else all of a sudden, you're only talking about the glory days. You're not even talking about reality.
What do you got? Montana State.
Montana State, my number 3 was putting the clamps down after the embarrassing loss to Sac State. The next week, they struggled mightily coming out of a bye at North Dakota on offense, but on defense, they put the hammer down.
Yes.
And they were that good defensively all the way until they went to the Fargo Dome. And I did a story leading up to the NDSU game on SkylineSportsMT.com, but this is a team that allowed less than 100 yards rushing every single game down the stretch, with the exception of UC Davis. They were giving up less than 2.5 yards per carry. When you talk about the first team defense being on the field, because there was multiple times when, like, Northern Colorado scored a pick 6, and Southern Utah's touchdown came against the third string defense. And there's a lot of different circumstantial elements, but when you're talking about just starting offenses going against the starting Bobcat defense, they gave up less than a touchdown a game.
Yeah.
Their last 7 until they got to NDSU. Yeah. They were as good as you can be. Mm-hmm. And I think that came to a head. My second moment was holding Austin Peay to 0 yards rushing.
It's incredible.
In the quarterfinals of the playoffs. I mean, this is a team that has a dual threat quarterback who was an All-American, a running back that's gotten NFL hype, and an All-American left tackle anchoring a good offensive line, and they did nothing. They did absolutely nothing to get Montana State into the Final Four of the FCS playoffs for the first time in a long time. So those two kind of go hand in hand, but I thought that the emergence of the defense, then with the peak against Austin Peay, those are two of my pinnacle moments for the Cats.
The moment of victory and going into the national semifinal and having created yet another high water mark for the program, monumental, and to do it holding the opponent to 0 yards on the ground, remarkable. Second, number 2 impactful moment for Montana is the loss to Montana State. I mean, this is obviously a negative for the Grizzlies and for their fan base, but it's hugely important in terms of the narrative about this program. This was a team that was the number 3 team in the nation going into that game, with all the momentum in the world, having just absolutely obliterated a very good Weber State football team. And it looked like if Montana beats Montana State, goes into the national playoffs as the number 3 seed, which they would have been, that the reattaining the status as the dominant program in the state would have been completed. And not only did they lose, they got beat down by this Bobcat team, who then, the group we know is went 4-0 and the whole thing, but also it stayed and halted what was the trajectory of just complete momentum to shoot off into the stratosphere, both nationally and certainly within the state of Montana. And so that completely muted what was sort of the narrative heading into that game. It just completely shifted it. So that was hugely impactful, and it will have ramifications into this season and the next from that one football game. And that is it's always, that game is always echoing into the offseason and into the next year and into history. But this one in particular I thought was huge.
Absolutely, and that was my number 1 moment for the Cats, too, just destroying the Grizz and sending this senior class out with a 4-0 record against Montana. But you're right, these games are so huge every year, but this one was more impactful, I think, than any we've seen in quite some time, because you do have both programs thriving and progressing, and I think that it helps Montana State hold off Montana for another year. I also think it was an abrupt wake-up call for the Grizz, because it goes back to the off-season story of Bobby Hauck standing on the golf course and talking to a couple people, and somebody asked another one of the people who had a media vote poll, a vote in the Big Sky Conference media poll, where'd you pick the Grizz? And they said, I think the Grizz will be 3rd or 4th. And Bobby Hauck looks at him and says, well, who are we going to lose to? Mm-hmm. And that's the coaching style of Bobby Hauck. We've never even acknowledged the prospect that we might lose to somebody. Mm-hmm. I mean, he had those guys straight up thinking they were going to go to Autzen Stadium and beat Oregon.
Well, and that's part of the part of what makes Bobby Hauck's coaching and his team's so very good, but also in a moment where you don't have the respect for your opponent that you need to have. It's embarrassing and humbling. And I don't know if it's humbling. I don't know if that's a factor or a thing that happens to Bobby Hauck and to his teams consequently, but it certainly was humiliating in that respect. And it textures, if I can say, the sort of the broad what is football in the state of Montana.
No doubt. And I think that there's definitive strengths and definitive weaknesses to every coaching style. And I think that the one weakness of never acknowledging even the prospect of losing is that maybe sometimes you might underestimate your opponent. And you just have to wonder if that was the case, because Montana State straight smacked Montana in the mouth, and Montana had no answers.
Yep.
And I think that it was definitely one of the more surprising results I can remember of any Big Sky game, let alone a Cat Grizz game. And I think that we will look back at it because it was such a peak of a chapter. The Bobcats closed the decade by winning the decade for the first time in so long, since the 70s. 4 in a row against the Grizzlies for the first time since Sonny Holland was the coach. Those are enormous things when it comes to every element of the program, from in-state recruiting to raising money around the state to national prestige and reputation. So we'll see where we go from here, but it definitely was quite the crescendo in the rivalry to end this decade.
It's Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. It's the Montana Football Hour. I'll give you my number one Grizzly impactful moment on the other side of the break. Okay? Up against it, we'll get there. Hey, Montana Football Hour is brought to you by Lithia Ford of Missoula. It's Ford's built for the holiday sales event at Lithia Ford of Missoula. Right now, get 0% for 60 months on the 2019 Ford F-150. The Ford F-150 makes tough tasks look easy, whether it's working on the job or heading to the ski hill for the weekend. Additionally, get the 2019 Ford Ranger for 1.9% for 60 months. The Ranger is tested under more extreme conditions than you would ever likely encounter. So set the date for your next adventure. Your Ranger is ready to get you there. Lithia Ford, across from Super Walmart on Brooks, has a huge inventory of new and used cars and trucks. Visit LithiaFordMissoula.com for more information. Search new and used inventory, financing specials, and get yourself in a Lithia Ford today. Lithia Ford is an official sponsor of the Montana Grizzlies and Tutel Nuanez Montana Football Hour.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, pump it up.
Refresh yourself at your local Town Pump. Get a 32-ounce fountain drink for $1.19. While you're there, grab a couple of everything bagels in the deli, 2 for $5. Town Pump, so convenient and right down the road from you.
Town Pump, right down the road. Pump it up, oh yeah.
It's the last week of 2019, and it's the last week of the year. It's time for deep decade-ending discounts on both new and used vehicles at Flanagan Motors Mazda. Look for reductions up to $6,500 on new Mazdas or 0.9% financing for up to 60 months. Literally, you'll get the best deal of the decade on the award-winning new 2019 CX-5. With combined rebates and discounts, take $3,000 off any new 2019 CX-5. Current Mazda owners get another $750 off any new Mazda purchase. Looking for used? Sale prices will be clearly marked on all vehicles. Interest rates are at decade-ending lows. There's never been a better time to finance a used car in this decade, and with your good credit, you won't make a payment until March 2020 on a new or used car. Don't worry about selling your trade. We need used vehicles, so bring your title and we'll be happy to appraise your car, truck, or SUV and make you an offer on the spot. Flanagan Motors decade-ending discounts end December 31st, 2019 at 2 p.m.
FLANAGAN Motors.
This is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
Do you know what's at stake after a car accident? Not only will you have to deal with pushy insurance companies, auto repair shops, endless doctor's appointments, and dozens of unforeseen problems, but also your normal day-to-day life. I'm Coulter here with Catherine from the Advocates Injury Attorneys, and she knows how hard this can be.
That's right. And with all of that, it can seem tempting to take the quick settlement that the insurance company is offering. But I can tell you from experience that it is not going to be a fair amount. I see it all the time where someone has settled with the insurance company and months later realizes that they still have pain from the accident. And now they're having to pay those bills out of their pocket. I don't want that to happen to anyone.
So what should our listeners do, Catherine?
Give us a call and discuss your situation with an attorney. The call is free and we'll gladly talk about your situation with you. If you have a case that we can help with, you will owe us nothing out of pocket. We actually make the insurance company pay for us to help you.
There you have it. Call the Advocates at 406-640-4444 or go online, MontanaAdvocates.com. You deserve the Advocates on your side.
If it matters to Missoula, it matters to us. Ryan Tutel and Coulter Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio.
Well, on a night run, boy, you better hold your tongue. Walking like you're coming from Kingdom Come.
Presented by Lydia Ford, it's Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, SWX Montana Television. Great to be with all of you, broadcasting live from the Chris Polaris Studios. Chris Polaris at 2904 West Broadway, Missoula Highway 83 in Sealy, online at chrispolaris.com. For those of you that were listening to the Music City Bowl, quick update. The scoring has opened up. It was 14-10 in favor of Mississippi State over Louisville at halftime. Louisville scored 2 touchdowns in the third quarter, including a defensive scoop and score, then scored another touchdown early in the fourth quarter to make it 31-14, 21 unanswered. Mississippi State, though, has just punched it in to halt the momentum at least a little bit. And it is now a 10-point game, 31-21 in favor of Louisville, who will be getting the ball back here as they play midway through the fourth quarter. Coulter, we were going through our most impactful moments for these two schools. And my number one most impactful moment on the season for the Montana Grizzlies was their beatdown of the Weber State Wildcats on November the 16th. Weber State came in undefeated in Big Sky play. They were 35. They were the number 3 team in the nation, and they didn't lose. They got whipped in a pretty rocking atmosphere at the University of Montana. 35-16 was the final, and that coming after the absolute decimation of Idaho the week before. Montana goes to number 3 in the nation, and first of all cemented their spot. I mean, this goes hand in hand with the other one, but that put them into the playoffs, no question about it. So that significant as well. It also positioned them at the moment to win the Big Sky Conference. And for the first time in, like you said, probably a decade, I think Montana fans started to go, oh, not only are we good, we're really good. And the whispers of things like, where could this team go? Could this be right now a Frisco type of season? Are they to that level? Which, no, the answer is they were not. But in that moment, that hadn't happened in a long time. For the University of Montana to be the number 3 team in the nation in the second to last week of the regular season and absolutely rolling a team that was really, really good. It was a huge victory and a huge status to attain.
So many programs want to be on top. So many programs thrive in the chase to be on top, but very few programs relish being on top and can actually handle it. I started going to Riley Corcoran's coach's show, Voice of the Grizz, with Bobby Houck on Wednesday nights down the stretch, because I think that sometimes on Mondays, especially with the way Montana's schedule works, a lot of times only the coaches have really watched film on the opponent, and so when they would bring players to the press conference, those guys don't really know. And I just think you get a better perspective on Wednesday than you do on Monday of a team, because you've worked on it, you've practiced it, and even our interviews with Coach Houck on this show were better from Wednesday, before Wednesday's practice, than Monday as well. And it's just kind of the nature of the game. But I thought that after the Weber State win, Riley Corcoran made a comment. He said something about introducing Houck as the coach of the number 4 team in the country. And Montana at that time was split in the polls. They were 3rd and 4th, depending on which poll you were looking at. And Coach Houck made sure to say, hey, but we're number 3 in the poll that I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And the program, Bobby Hauck wants the program to relish being the top dog.
Most programs go, well, we don't look at the polls. We don't care where we're at, this, that, and the other.
Right. It's going to be so fascinating because Montana State, there's no doubt that Jeff Choate is great at chasing that golden carrot. And I think that losing to North Dakota State in the fashion that Montana State did is actually really good for the trajectory of their program because it shows them, hey, we were this much better this year. We made it 2 rounds farther in the playoffs, but we still had the exact same end of the season result. And Jeff Choate had such a great line. He said, I think that this season we established ourselves as being worthy of being in the national conversation among the national elite, and we do not deserve to play for the national championship yet. Mm-hmm. I think that's a key moment. But if and when the Bobcats do attain consistent national prominence, how does Jeff Choate and his staff, or whoever maybe is the head coach, how do they handle it? That'll be so interesting to watch. Whereas we already know how Coach Hauck handles it. He can't stand being anything but that. And he's so good at being the Darth Vader villain on top. So we'll see where these two programs go here. But make no mistake, you're right. That Weber State win really announced Montana's at least projected ascendance.
Well, and a lot of people would say, well, what about a 73-point performance in the playoffs that sent the Grizzlies to the national quarterfinal? And that's, of course, getting a playoff win in resounding fashion like that is a huge moment for Montana. Not just getting in, but winning a game and moving into the quarterfinal, big time. But also, it was Southeastern Louisiana, and all respect to a program that's an up and coming program. They're not Weber State. They're not close. And that was the moment, by the way, that got Montana through a certain threshold that they had not been past in quite a while. And I think that's why, to me, it's a bigger moment than that game was for the Grizz. So there you go. It's the Montana Football Hour. It's presented by Lithia Ford of Missoula. We will take a break. We'll come back. Mike Dugar going to join us, talk about the Seattle Seahawks. They had a very good game and a disappointing loss, even with the reemergence of beast mode. How fun was that last night to watch Marshawn Lynch get stifled initially and then break in and get a couple of runs and even a touchdown, get the Skittles out, people.
Oh, the irony, though, of the false start on the goal line and Marshawn Lynch doesn't get the carry again.
Yeah,
it could have been this redemptive moment. Obviously, it's not the Super Bowl, it's the regular season, but it could have been.
It's a whole different scenario. We'll talk with Mike Dugar about that. He covers the Seahawks for The Athletic at the top of the hour, and we'll get into some more of the NFL playoffs as well. And then in about 30 minutes, we're going to circle back to the Cats and Grizz football a little bit and talk about these teams through the lens of their coaches and where these programs are at now and what the future may hold for these two schools. So we'll get to all of that in the second hour. Hey, at the Silver Slipper, it's all about great food, tasty beverages, and their urge to have a good time. Whether you're looking for an affordable family meal or a late-night game of poker, the Silver Slipper has what you're looking for. Right now, Silver Slipper is your football headquarters, 56 TVs to watch sports on, drink specials every day, a full liquor store, and Tarantino's Pizzeria. Silver Slipper has all you need, plus the friendliest staff in town. Celebrate New Year's Eve tomorrow at the Slipper with a Roaring 20s party. Entry is free. The DJ starts at 9 o'clock. There's a champagne toast at midnight as well. Don your zoot suit, your flapper dress, whatever you can find, and enter to win their Best Dressed contest. Visit the SilverSlipperLounge.com for more info. Stop by today and see why the Silver Slipper is one of Montana's best-kept secrets across the street from Super Walmart on Brooks.
Hi there. It's Les Schwab Tires. Well, more like Les Schwab alignment and brakes and shocks and wheels and tires. Now, some tire places don't offer all that. They only sell tires. And we're not sure how they sleep at night, because all those services affect things like steering and stopping. That's why we offer more than tires to help keep you safe. Stop by or book an appointment at leschwab.com. Les Schwab Tires, doing the right thing since 1952.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
Alpine Touch is legendary around the state of Montana for providing delicious seasonings for every grilling occasion. Now, Alpine Touch offers so much more, from a savory new barbecue sauce to spicy pepper blends to tasty barbecue rubs. In addition to the classic, Alpine Touch has a variety of seasoning salts for whatever you need to spice up. Now that the holidays are over, Alpine Touch makes a perfect thank you gift to show your friends and relatives you love them. Alpine Touch, available at retail locations around Montana or online at alpinetouch.com. Alpine Touch, Montana's special spice.
There's a saying, opportunity never knocks twice. When you're ready to take advantage of your next opportunity, look to your local bank. Opportunity Bank of Montana. Opportunity Bank offers options for mortgage loans, small business loans, equipment financing, agriculture, and more. Our experienced team can provide solutions to help you welcome your next big opportunity. There's nothing like the feeling of progress. So let's get started today. Come see us at your local Opportunity Bank of Montana. OpportunityBank.com, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
More than 60 years ago, R.J. Rangich opened up Rangich Brothers with one thing in mind: quality and family tradition. Those family traditions continue today and live through our family, staff, and those who buy our RVs. So whether your travels include the shores of Flathead, Glacier Peaks, Yellowstone Geysers, or the hidden gems in between, jump into Jayco and experience the best freedom you and your family will ever know. Only where a handshake means something. Rangich Brothers RV Center.
Hey, it's Coulter, and I'm here with Catherine from The Advocates. If you've been in a car accident or need help dealing with the insurance companies, you should give The Advocates a call. They can tell you if you have a case right over the phone.
That's right. It doesn't cost anything to call, and we'd be happy to talk to you and assess your situation. You don't want to have to deal with contacting the insurance companies and setting up a claim. We can do that for you. We take the hassle out of the process, so you can just focus on getting better.
There you go, folks. If you've been injured in an accident, give The Advocates a call, 406-640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com. You deserve The Advocates.
If you are hurt or disabled, you may be entitled to benefits from an insurance company or Social Security. I'm Chris Helmer, an attorney at Clark Fork Law Offices. Our Missoula firm specializes in worker compensation, personal injury, and Social Security disability. There are many unknowns when injured or disabled. The other side is fighting hard. You should too. Call Clark Fork Law at 728-0168 for a free consultation or visit clarkforklaw.com. Again, 728-0168.
ESPN Radio for Western Montana. KKVU HD3 Stevensville and 102.9 FM on K275BS Missoula. ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon, Ryan Tutel, Colton Nuanez. Here's some sports news for you. The Montana Grizzly men's and women's basketball teams are 1-0 in conference play after beating Northern Arizona in nearly identical fashion Saturday. The men, playing at Dahlberg Arena, were down 8 in the second half before riding a 15-2 run to a 6-point lead and ultimately coming away with a 79-72 victory. Senior Saeed Pridgett led the way with 27, while Kendall Manuel added 16. The Grizz host Sacramento State tonight in Game 2 of the conference slate. Tip-off is at 7.
The Lady Grizz played on the road in Flagstaff, opened up the game with a 15-3 run and finished off a win of 79-71 at Northern Arizona. Senior guard Mackenzie Johnson led the way for Montana, going 8 of 11 from the field to finish with 25 points, while sophomore Abby Anderson added 15. The Lady Grizz are on the road again tonight against Sacramento State.
The Montana State men also got off on the right foot, earning a convincing 66-51 win over Sacramento State in Bozeman Saturday. Harold Frey and Jabril Bello both scored 18 points, while MSU held the Hornets to under 35% from the field. The Cats host NAU tonight.
Montana State women were the most dominant of all, and they laid the hammer down on Sac State on the road, 85-48. 9 players scored for the Lady Cats, led by 23 from Martha Cooterer. MSU heads to Flagstaff to play NAU tonight.
This ESPN Sports Center is presented by Clark Fork Law.
Welcome back. Tutel Nuanez, hour number 2. Outstanding to be with you on ESPN Radio. We missed you. It's been a week. Back for one day. We're out tomorrow and New Year's. We'll be back Thursday again. And from there forward, on into the future. So fear not. We're broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, online at kurtzpolaris.com. If you missed anything in the first hour, check it out on the podcast. It's available wherever you get your podcast. Download it, rate it, review it. We appreciate all that. The podcast available thanks to the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel. If you want to listen live, go online, 1029ESPN.com. You can listen to the stream. The stream is available all the time on the Listen Live tab. It's there thanks to Opportunity Bank. Your local bank, your opportunity. It's time to talk a little bit of NFL and more specifically the Seattle Seahawks, who lost the last game of the season, thereby entering the wild card postseason as a wild card team rather than as a divisional champion, as they fell in a thriller, or another thriller, to the San Francisco 49ers. We go now to the Rangers Brothers RV phone line. We welcome in our buddy Mike Dugar, covers the Seahawks for The Athletic, was at the game last night. Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm good. I wish I just didn't book a flight to Philly with a middle seat for 5 hours. But,
man.
Other than that, I'm doing all right.
Maybe you get some very nice people. You double your chances at having a nice conversation with somebody. Are you a talker on the plane? Do you do that, or do you want to put on the headphones and write or do whatever?
I have literally never spoken to anyone on a plane. I have headphones, and I don't have AirPods. I have over-the-head, so it is very clear that I'm not interested in talking to you.
Don't speak to me.
About where you're going, where you're coming from, your family, your life. Just let me listen to my music and catch this nap. So, I'm very antisocial on airplanes.
Once upon a time when I was flying back from Dallas, I had just watched Montana State get destroyed by Sam Houston State in the quarterfinals of the FCS playoffs, and I sat by this guy, and he was an older guy, probably in his 70s, and he was flying back to Montana as well. And at the time, I was working for the Bozeman Daily Chronicle, and he was like, "Oh, you're a sports writer. Cool. I read the Chronicle all the time. Are you the guy that covers the Cats?" Yeah, I'm the guy that covers Montana State. Okay. And he's like, "I think you're doing a great job." He's like, "I was a sports writer once upon a time." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Who'd you write for?" He's like, Sports Illustrated. And I was like, "Excuse me?" And then it turns out this whole story extrapolated itself. It was Thomas McGuane, the famous 1960s and 1970s author. He wrote for the Sports Illustrated in the late 60s, writing about hunting, but then he had his famous novel, Panama, became a very famous writer, wrote a couple movie scripts, and now lives in McLeod, Montana. But
see, Mike, that's why you gotta talk to the passenger next to you. You never know who you're gonna meet. Hey, Mike, let's talk a little bit about the Seattle Seahawks. They lose 26-21 last night in a game that was a thrilling game, obviously disappointing for Seahawks fans. Everybody is talking about the last 40 seconds of this game and the delay of game penalty and the non-call on what could have been a DPI and all of that. As you're sitting there watching this, and particularly on the delay of game, there was a potential injury on the offensive line, turned out sort of not to be. Marshawn Lynch didn't really have his helmet ready to go into the game at the moment where this potentially quasi-redemptive thing on the one to win a game and win the division and all that is there. How did this play out as you were watching this?
I was really confused by the delay game penalty. I was just flabbergasted. I was like, this cannot happen in this scenario with this guy and this everything about it was just wrong. And I should point out George was fine. He got up. I mean, he may have been banged up, but he got up, got to the line, and they spiked it. George is not the reason for the delay. It's what I think happened is, I noticed during that drive, Marshawn had his coat on, no helmet. I don't even think he had gloves on. He clearly thought he was done for the day, which makes sense because he doesn't know the 2-minute offense. He just got here a week ago. So it makes sense that Travis would be the guy there, and he thinks he's done, because he doesn't think they're going to get a goal line shot probably.
Yeah.
And, so I think the communication when they're switching from their 2-minute offense and their 2-minute personnel, which is who they had in on John Ursu's catch, switching from that to get Marshawn in the game, a guy who, because, I don't know how many people know this, when you're in the game and you're, part of the rotation, you stand next to your coach. So when it's like hockey. It's like there's line changes, essentially. Yeah. You're ready to go. If you're just chilling on the sideline eating candy with a beanie on, it's going to take a little longer to get the call to you and for you to go find your helmet and gloves and whatever and get back on the field. So I think just that little part, maybe they were confused about, whether to go with their goal line package because they didn't have any timeouts. So running the ball, maybe only get one shot at that. So I think maybe those two factors there just blew the game, and maybe blew the season, really. That was just such a disaster, I think. I mean, they still got other shots at it, and, they were 2 inches away from Jacob Hollister, sending them to or keeping them home, I guess, in the wild card round. But I thought that the blown delay game at the one, which with Marshawn Lynch there, like you said, just that the relationship Marshawn has with the Seahawks in the 1 yard line, it all could have just righted all the wrongs in a sense right there, and they just whiffed.
But that was going to be exactly what I was going to ask you, is just the serendipitous but then not moment that almost happened. I mean, you almost got Marshawn Lynch on the goal line to win the NFC West, and instead they don't. And instead it goes awry again. First of all, just tell us, what do you how much have the injuries in the backfield hindered Seattle? What's the environment been like the last week with the re-signing of Marshawn Lynch? And what do you think just in general, the fact that they weren't able to right that wrong from the Super Bowl and it kind of all played out like it did the first time around?
I mean, it's still a storybook ending, I think. I kind of wrote that it killed that, but the more I thought about it, every movie doesn't end positively for the protagonist. One of my favorite football movies is Friday Night Lights, and they lost, I believe, right on the 1-yard line as well. Sometimes it happens like that. That was just a disaster. To whiff on that, though, is especially with the delay of game. Of all things, urgency should be the top priority there. Or maybe along with being on the same page. But I think the injuries haven't been as detrimental as maybe people thought. And I didn't think they'd be that bad. I remember last season, I think every game that Chris Carson didn't play in 2018, they had a 100-yard rusher. I'm pretty sure that was the case. I think Mike Davis did in Arizona last season, and I'm pretty sure Rashad Penny had a 100-yard game at the Rams last year. As long as the run blocking is there, the difference in talent from the elite running backs that are good, maybe above average, isn't that drastic. All these guys are pretty much fast and can make a guy miss or two and can break a tackle. I mean, yes, Chris Carson's probably a better talent than all the other guys they have on the roster, but as long as the blocking is there, they'll still be able to run the ball effectively. I think Travis only had 10 carries. It went over 60 yards, and caught all 5 of his passes, I think, as well. And some of those went for first downs. It can still be fine with Travis and Marshawn, especially as a 1-2 punch. Neither guy is probably built to touch the ball maybe 20 times a game, but they could each get to anywhere from 8 to 15, on any given Sunday. So I think they're fine there. I think a lot of the guys have been really hyped up about having Marshawn back, just because they needed that boost. I don't know if that'll carry over into the this wild card round, but I mean, just the fact that they can run the ball and be physical and they don't have to change who they are with these new personnel, I think that's the biggest part.
Mike Dugard joining us. He's on Twitter at Mike Dugard. He covers the Seattle Seahawks for The Athletic. Mike, when it comes to this wild card game, if you want to look at this through rose-colored glasses, maybe for Seattle, they're going to be playing this week anyway, no matter what. Now they're playing on the road at Philadelphia instead of at home against, I believe, would have been the Minnesota Vikings. Is that... I understand traveling, and especially for them at CenturyLink, is such an advantage. You don't want to go to the East Coast, but when you're talking about the team that you're actually playing against, it's not clear to me that you wouldn't prefer to play the Philadelphia Eagles right now than you would the Minnesota Vikings. Granted, Carson Wentz has been playing much better the last month and all that, but I mean, this is a team, talk about injuries. They are completely riddled with injuries. The Philadelphia Eagles are. This doesn't seem like a worse situation from at least this week's standpoint in that sense to me.
I mean, maybe the matchup is a bit more favorable, but you got to look at it this way, too. If they'd have beat the Niners Sunday night, and yeah, they'd be facing the Vikings, who are a better opponent than Philly, but they would have also just beaten the best team in the conference, right? So they would have had the confidence to feel like even if they were 5-3 at home this year, which in that scenario they would be, that's not the worst thing, in the world. Plus, again, you would have just beaten the Niners
for sure.
Without your starting left tackle, your starting free safety, and you're down to your 4th and 5th string running backs, 2 of which you sign off the street. So I mean, that factored in. Minnesota may be better than Philly, but if you just beat San Francisco, in that emotional game, then they would have to have been feeling like they could beat anyone, and I'm pretty sure the fan base would have reflected that optimism. The other part about that is the 3 seed has a chance to host the NFC title game. The gap between 1, 2, and 5 in that scenario would be Green Bay, New Orleans, and San Fran as the 5. There's no real significant gap there. San Fran is still probably better than those two, evidenced by them beating both of those teams. So you have a chance where you send San Fran on the road, which is just a win for Seahawks in general. B, you get to stay home, and there's a chance that if San Fran does make a run, you can maybe be the team that hosts the NFC title game. There were so many just other advantages to having home field, at least in the wild card round, aside from just the one matchup of Philly versus Minnesota. You're going to the playoffs. It's not to win one game. It's to win, 3 or whatever, 4, I guess, if you're in the wild card round. So if you're looking big picture, the route to the Super Bowl is a lot easier when you're playing as a 3 versus as a 5. So that's where I was like, no, Minnesota, you want to play Minnesota next week. That's what Seattle wanted. The players wanted it, the coaches wanted it, everybody in the organization wanted it, and that's why, for all those reasons that I just rattled off.
We get you out of here on this, then. It's been about 6 weeks since Seattle beat Philadelphia 17-9 in Philly. What are your initial thoughts on this playoff matchup?
Yeah, see, and I think that people forget how bad the offense looked that week. Like, the offense needed, like, Rashad Penny to go beast mode for a second and a Malik Turner trick play to really have the advantage. Otherwise, they looked awful. Tyler Lockett wasn't involved. DK had, like, 2 or 3 drops. Russ missed about the easiest throw he'll ever have in his life. Just sailing one on Jacob Hollister, the pass protection. I wasn't there. I think he was sacked like 5 times. This will not be a walk in the park. It just will not be. It's going to probably be another game that comes down to the wire. I think they should beat Philly. They're better than Philly, and Philly's receivers are no more famous than any of us on this line right now. Like, Philly's receivers are, half their team is on IR or they're just dudes off the street.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous. So if there's any team more banged up than Seattle in the postseason, it's certainly Philly. But that doesn't guarantee anything. Everyone's an NFL player at this point. John Ursua came off the bench and had his first ever catch, and it almost beat the 49ers in Week 17, on 4th and 10. So, anybody can make plays at the end of the day. So I think they should win. They should beat Philly. It'll probably be close. But they're going to need that same type of energy as the last time. They're going to need to force turnovers. They're going to need to have a pass rush, Clowney didn't have a quarterback hit, Sunday night. There was only 2 quarterback hits, I believe, and they were both sacks on the first drive. They're going to need to be a lot better than they were Sunday night, even against a Philly team, which is far inferior compared to San Fran.
Mike, we appreciate it always, and good luck on the middle seat all the way over to Philadelphia, and we'll catch up with you next week after this wild card matchup. All right.
All right, thanks. I got 2 window seats coming back on my connecting flights, so hopefully that'll be a little better.
There you go. You get the pillow, you lean it up against there, and you're in business. All right, that's the way to go with that. Mike, we appreciate it very much always.
Thank you.
Mike Dugar covers the Seahawks for The Athletic, at Mike Dugar on Twitter. You want to go follow him there. Here's the thing, though, Colter, to me. And listen, there is no doubt. I'm not going to sit here and argue that it's a better situation for the Seahawks to go to Philadelphia than it is to play at home against Minnesota, even though Minnesota's a better team than Philadelphia is. It's just better for all the reasons that he outlined. That said, if Seattle wins this football game, the overwhelming likelihood, well, I don't know what you think about the New Orleans Vikings matchup, but is that they're going to go play in Green Bay against the Green Bay Packers. Okay? That's presuming that the Saints win this football game. Had they won against San Francisco and then hold serve against Minnesota, the overwhelmingly likely scenario is that they're going to play in New Orleans against the Saints.
Mm-hmm.
This is you're 2 for 2 on actually playing worse teams by losing. If it holds that way, then to me, I think New Orleans is the best team in the NFC. I think New Orleans is the best team. Okay. And the fact that they're 13-3 and the 3 seed is crazy, man. That's crazy. So they kind of
also crazy that the Packers, are they the 1 or the 2?
They're the 2
because the Niners got the 1.
They would have been the 1, which is remarkable, right?
They're like the 5th best team.
Well, they're not the 5th best team. They're the 2nd best team, maybe the 3rd. But the point is that it's. Obviously you can't predict the future, and you just want to win those games, and you do want to send San Francisco packing twice. You want to do that. It's big for morale. It's big to play at home again, and all everything that could have gone on there. But at the end of the day, pick your poison. Everybody's good at this point. Would you rather play Green Bay in Green Bay, or would you rather play New Orleans in the Superdome? Probably take Green Bay. At this point, Green Bay's a really good football team, but they have not been the dominant sort of team that a team like New Orleans has been throughout the course of this year, or even, frankly, for a good portion of the season, the San Francisco 49ers. They have found ways to win, and you know what? There's an art to that. You know who's very much like that? The Seattle Seahawks are very much like that. So I think that at the end of the day, this is a far bigger game for San Francisco than it was for the Seattle Seahawks. Okay, it was just huge for San Francisco to be able to go home field throughout and have a bye week as opposed to on the road throughout and playing next week. I mean, that is the turn of events there on that 1 foot of territory that happened on the end of the game is just incalculable.
So often, too, though, we get head over heels into trying to analyze all this stuff in depth and ad nauseum, and so much about the NFL. How healthy are you? Who's hurt?
Yeah.
The Seahawks lost 2 games. Mike Dugard just said that he didn't think it was as impactful as he maybe thought it might be when Chris Carson and CJ Prosise and who's the third? Penny?
Yeah, Rashad Penny.
CJ Prosise.
CJ Prosise, excuse me. He said it hasn't been as impactful. Well, they lost 2 straight. So it has been. But those injuries, I get what he's saying, though, because they've been able to stem the tide a little bit more, whereas the Vikings had a chance to play their way into that top 4, top 3, maybe get a home game. And without Dalvin Cook and without Alexander Mattison, no, it's not happening.
Here's the thing I thought was interesting. In the game against Arizona 2 weeks ago for Seattle, when Travis Homer comes into the game in the second quarter, he looks awful. He doesn't look like a professional football player, quite frankly, in that spot.
Swimming.
When he, though, gets a week to be the guy and to prepare, and they find the stuff that he's good at and his skill sets that are not implemented for that game plan against the Arizona Cardinals, they go up against a much better defense. Maybe one of the best defenses in football, and he was very solid for them last night. He ran the football and they blocked it up and they schemed it up, and so that's, I think, the key. It's who you're missing, but it's also when you're missing them. So I think that's a big part of everything that was going on. Let's go to the phones. Who do we got? Terry here on the phone. Come on into the show here. What do you got?
Hey, man, this is kind of, not Seahawks or Vikings or anything, but Washington Redskins. I read that sounds like they're going to introduce Ron Rivera as soon as they can as the ex-head coach, and that Bruce Allen has gone as the GM. Do you think that will make a difference in Washington?
Sadly, no, because, Terry, who's still the owner in Washington?
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
But it's kind of one of those things where Ron did a admirable job in Carolina, about as good as I think a guy could have expected him to do. And it's kind of like Bill Parcells being in Dallas. He stood up to Jerry Jones. I wonder if maybe Ron might be able to take and do that a little bit to Schneider there.
Daniel Snyder. Here,
the Redskins are never going to be fixed under their current ownership. You can't just. The most underrated part, everybody thinks that if you get a quarterback, you got a chance. You have to have a quarterback and a coach and a GM and an owner that are all on the same page. And if you don't have that, my brother and I were talking about this the other day. Jameis Winston just went 30-30. He just threw 30 touchdowns and 30 picks. Jameis Winston's 5 years into his NFL career. He's absolutely the most volatile guy in the league right now. But what actually is he? Because if you actually break down the guys that are outside the top 7 or 8 quarterbacks in the league, like the Ravens are good because of Lamar Jackson. The system's built around him. The Seahawks are good because of Russell Wilson. He can be the captain. The Packers are good because of Aaron Rodgers. So many other guys, they're good for the system that they're in or not, but who knows what would happen. If you put Matt Stafford on the Saints, what would Matt Stafford be? If you put Jameis Winston, if he would have been in the seat that Jared Goff was in last year, what would we think of Jameis Winston?
It's so interesting because a lot of people are on Pete Carroll today.
Right.
And Terry, thanks for the call. And rightfully so. I mean, this, even if it wasn't directly his fault, this falls at the feet of Pete Carroll of completely messing this up at the end, period.
Right.
And this isn't the first time that something like this has happened. I mean, not even the not handing it off to Marshawn Lynch and all that, which I actually think from a coaching standpoint, he did all of that correctly. But he's not the quote unquote best coach in the world as far as the Bill Belichick's or whoever you want to put in there. But also, he's been to 2 Super Bowls, won one, has an overwhelmingly winning record as a head coach. And it's like, if people are upset with this guy for not getting it exactly right in that moment, or in fact getting it completely wrong in that moment, but who are you going to get instead? And the same can be said for the quarterback. If you got a quarterback that is good for your system, even if he's not the guy who's carrying your team, count your blessings, because there's a lot of teams that just got a guy who's an absolute anchor to the ship.
And that's my whole point, is that to have sustained success, you have to have sustained continuity.
Yep.
You can, in the NFL, because of the one-and-done nature of the playoffs, catch lightning in a bottle if you have the right quarterback with the right scheme. I mean, Nick Foles is a Super Bowl MVP. Is Nick Foles anywhere close to the top 20 quarterbacks in the NFL? No, he's not.
I mean, not
in that system, at that moment, he was, right? But
sure.
All I'm saying is the only way to have sustained success is to have organizational continuity. As long as Dan Snyder owns the Washington Redskins, they will not have that because he's been so sporadic. They at one time actually had good GMs. Had to move on from them. How many GMs have they had in the last 18 years? 6? 7? I mean, they've had so many general managers, so many coaches until you get on the same page. Look at all the great organizations in pro sports, the Spurs, the Patriots. What do they have? They have continuity from the top down.
By the way, speaking of the Patriots, this was a highlight for me, and I am not a hater of the Patriots the way some people are, but to watch Miami go in and do the Patriots in Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, it made me so very happy. And then for Kansas City to get the bye, and now for the road to be a harder one, in fact, a very hard one for New England, and for some of that varnish and that, everybody if they're the 2 seed, you just go, forget it. I don't care if they got to go to Baltimore in the AFC Championship game, mark it. They're going to the Super Bowl. Now, no. This just became so very much more difficult. If you got to win at Arrowhead and then at Baltimore,
totally. Good
luck. Good luck to you. I don't care how good your defense is. That was wonderful. Shout out, Tucker Sargent. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. Hey, we said we would get into the trajectory of the Montana and Montana State football programs from the coaching side of things. We're going to do that right after this. Hey, Lost Trail Powder Mountain, they're open. And right now, they're open every single day through Sunday the 5th. That's right. A lot of days they get some weekdays are not open. They're open every day all the way through this week. And are you ready for this? They're expecting 1 to 2 feet of snow, the first big storm of the year, forecast for tomorrow through Wednesday. So get locked and loaded to Lost Trail Powder Mountain. If you want to find out more conditions, text the word powder to 31996. 31996, and you get powder alerts from Lost Trail Powder Mountains. Down there, I was up there just this weekend, driving over the pass, checking it out, looking very good. They're open every day, 9:30 to 4, 9:30 a.m. to 4, now through Sunday, Lost Trail Powder Mountain.
'Tis the season for a festive holiday feast at the Montana Club with mouth-watering dishes like our cranberry brie walnut tarts and pork Diane, or savor our Chardonnay salmon or blackened shrimp fillet. Be sure to wrap up your celebration with our decadent pecan rum raisin cake, all available for a limited time only through January 5th. See the full menu at montanaclub.com. Happy holidays from all of us at the Montana Club on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, pump it up.
Burritos and beer, they just go together, don't you think? Stop by your local Town Pump and pick up a 24-pack of Pabst or Rainier for only $17.99. And grab a couple of burritos from the deli, 2 for $2.22. Make your stop fast and convenient at Town Pump, right down the road.
Town Pump, right down the road. Pump it up, yeah.
It's the last week of 2019, and it's the last week of the year. It's time for deep decade-ending discounts on both new and used vehicles at Flanagan Motors Mazda. Look for reductions up to $6,500 on new Mazdas or 0.9% financing for up to 60 months. Literally, you'll get the best deal of the decade on the award-winning new 2019 CX-5. With combined rebates and discounts, take $3,000 off any new 2019 CX-5. Current Mazda owners get another $750 off any new Mazda purchase. Looking for used? Sale prices will be clearly marked on all vehicles. Interest rates are at decade-ending lows. There's never been a better time to finance a used car in this decade, and with your good credit, you won't make a payment until March 2020 on a new or used car. Don't worry about selling your trade. We need used vehicles, so bring your title and we'll be happy to appraise your car, truck, or SUV and make you an offer on the spot. Flanagan Motors decade-ending discounts end December 31st, 2019 at 2 p.m.
FLANAGEAN Motors.
There's a saying, opportunity never knocks twice. When you're ready to take advantage of your next opportunity, look to your local bank. Opportunity Bank of Montana. Opportunity Bank offers options for mortgage loans, small business loans, equipment financing, agriculture, and more. Our experienced team can provide solutions to help you welcome your next big opportunity. There's nothing like the feeling of progress. So let's get started today. Come see us at your local Opportunity Bank of Montana. OpportunityBank.com, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Your Earl Grey tea gets a lot more exciting when Florence Coffee Company turns it into a London fog. This delicious beverage has become popular in the Northwest for a good reason. Steamed milk, vanilla, and Earl Grey tea combine to give you a drink that is uplifting and calming at the same time. It's the perfect afternoon pick-me-up. Try a London fog today at any Florence Coffee location or go to FlorenceCoffeeCo.com.
The best flavor under the big sky. Florence Coffee Company.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good evening, Ryan Tutel, Colter Nuanez. Here's some sports news for you. The Montana Grizzly men's and women's basketball teams are 1-0 in conference play after beating NAU in nearly identical fashion Saturday. The men playing in Dahlberg Arena were down 8 in the second half before riding a 15-2 run to a 6-point lead and ultimately coming away with a 79-72 victory. Senior Saeed Pridgett led the way with 27, while Kendall Manuel added 16. Hoover's host, Sacramento State, tonight. Game 2 of the conference slate tip-off at 7 o'clock.
Lady Grizz will be playing on the road in Flagstaff, or they were, playing on the road in Flagstaff with a 15-3 run. They started off against Northern Arizona on the way to a 79-71 win. Senior guard Mackenzie Johnston led the way for Montana, going 8 of 11 from the field. They finished with 25 points. Sophomore Abby Anderson added 15 points. Lady Grizz are on the road again tonight, Sac State.
Montana State also got off on the right foot with the men earning a convincing 66-51 win over Sac State in Bozeman Saturday. Harold Frey and Jabril Bello both scored 18 points, while MSU held the Hornets to under 35% from the field. The Cats host NAU tonight.
And the Montana State women, they were the most dominant of all 4 Montana basketball teams. They beat Sac State 85-48 on the road. 9 players scored for the Cats, including 23 from Martha Cooter. MSU is at NAU tonight.
And finally, in the Music City Bowl, Mississippi State came from ahead and lost to Louisville 38-28. The Cardinal getting the dub. How about that? 14-10 at halftime, 38-28 the final. Louisville winning the Music City Bowl. By the way, did you watch the Serve Pro First Responders Bowl? Unbelievable game. Western Kentucky versus Western Michigan. Western Michigan tie ball game 2020, 3rd and 1. RPO. The quarterback takes the ball out of there. Wide open spaces, and you know what he does, Colter? Falls over. He fell over behind the line of scrimmage, did not even get the first down, might have had a touchdown on the play. End up having to go for it on 4th down because they're outside of field goal range. Don't get that. On the last play of the game, thanks to a 12-man on the field penalty on Western Michigan, Western Kentucky gets a 52-yard game-winning field goal. No time left. My Broncos finding ways to lose bowl games. Terrible. Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. 329-1899, the phone number. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, online at kurtzpolaris.com.
I want to make a point real quick.
Please.
One thing that I think gets lost on college football fans is how sometimes a game, just a specific singular game, can evolve and morph so rapidly early that it becomes its own game, and identities and scheme and the way a team is entering the game can be thrown out the window, especially when it comes to evaluation. I was watching the Cotton Bowl between Memphis and Penn State. There was a couple big plays early, then a special teams error that turned into a special teams touchdown, and all of a sudden, both sides have scored 3 times in the first quarter and a half. Memphis is really good on offense. They have been.
Yeah.
And I think that's evidenced by where'd their coach go, Mike Norvell? He got a job. Oh, he got Florida State. He got the Florida State job. But, I mean, they've been really good on offense. They've put a lot of guys in the league. They have another receiver who I think will probably be, if not a first round, a top 50 draft pick, could be one of the top prospects in the deal. But Penn State, I mean, they are just littered with NFL guys, both sides. And Penn State's defense has probably 4 guys that'll be in the conversation as top 50 or 60 draft picks.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I'm saying is I wanted to make the point that I thought Penn State looked awesome on defense, even though they gave up 40-plus points. Because that's
somebody wants to ask about the Ohio State targeting.
I mean, sometimes that's just the way that the game evolves. It has nothing to do with the evaluation of Penn State's defense. They're ferocious on defense. They just gave up a bunch of points because that's just the way that the game evolves. So I think that when you're watching these bowl games,
Rob on the line,
watch them under that lens.
Right.
It's a singular game. You never know. A team that's great on defense could just give it all up.
Yeah. And it wouldn't even be necessarily their fault. It's the way these things go. By the way, I want to remind everybody we are off the air tomorrow and New Year's Day. We'll be back on Thursday the 2nd and thereafter. We're going to get to this conversation, but this is your show, people. 329-1899. You want to be in here doing this with us? Go ahead. Let's go to Rob. A lot has transpired in the last week. I mean, we had the national semifinals going on and everything like that. Hello, Rob. How are you? What do you got?
Not bad. How you guys doing?
Great.
So, big-time Ohio State fan. Game tore me up. What do you guys think about that targeting call and how that non-catch fumble call really how it affected the game overall? Honestly,
well, first of all, I mean the answer to your exact question is massively. It affected the game hugely and against Ohio State in both instances. The targeting call, for what targeting is, was targeting. I mean, it was targeting, and even though it wasn't flagged on the field, it was a helmet leading thing, and so I mean that's just sort of what it is, and it's a tough situation in that spot. But the rule, such as it is, that's the call. That's fine. I thought so. This is something that's coming out now to me, and I'm glad you asked this question, Rob, because I didn't realize this until, they have all the former referees now who are talking about this. Kirk Herbstreit was adamant that it was a catch and then a fumble and was going to be an Ohio State touchdown, and I agreed with him in the moment, and I agree with him still. Looked to me for all the world like it was a catch, and even though his momentum is going backwards, he's got the football. What kind of move can you make if you are being held by somebody else? There's not a lot to be done there. But the referee came on and said he disagreed and he thought that the call would be overturned. And he said this, and I thought that this was crucial. We don't look at receptions in slow motion. I didn't know that. I mean, they do. Let me say that differently. They do look at them in slow motion, but they assess catch or no catch essentially in real time. You know what other calls they do that with? Pass interference.
Right.
And so while we're sitting here and you got the still frame of the offense or the defensive pass interference last night in the Seattle game or in this catch, you go, well, that's a catch. It's a catch all day. What else is he going to do? They're not looking at it. They're not assessing it in slow motion. They are assessing it in real time. And that's why he says there wasn't enough there to constitute a catch. I disagree with that in that instance. I mean, first of all, that's the only way that I can understand why you would overturn it. It looked to me like a catch and a fumble and a scoop and score and 6 points for Ohio State. And that's obviously a huge momentum swinging play. I don't believe, if I recall, that Clemson scored on that drive. So Ohio State still got the stop. In fact, it may have been even a third down where it was an immediate punt. But it's not obviously a scoop and score defensive touchdown, which is a huge momentum swing. That said, Ohio State had their chances. They had their chances early, and they had their chances late. And I do not sit here and go,
your arms,
they had it ripped from them. I know a lot of Ohio State fans feel like, and even Ryan Day, voicing his anger and discontent about a lot of calls that he thought went against him. I really only thought one call went, quote unquote, against them in a really meaningful way, and that was the fumble. And that's a big call for sure. But it wasn't the game. It wasn't the game as far as I'm concerned. I thought the game was in Ohio State's hands, and they failed to score 2 red zone touchdowns that ended up being field goals that ended up making what could have been a 3-touchdown game or at least a 17-point game, a 2-touchdown game. And give Clemson all the credit, man. They know how to deal with that. And it felt like once Clemson kind of broke through, got it figured out a little bit, they were going to be tough to contain, and they were.
If I'm going to... Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I agree. Ohio State had 100% chance to win that football game, but with those 2 calls going against them, momentum swing, yes, and 6 points off the board, that just completely just tears them down, tears them away.
Well, it did change. It did change it, but again, the targeting call was targeting. It's not. That's just what it was. So it's a huge momentum swing, but that's on the player. That's something that transpired on the field. The other one, look, it's just kind of the way it goes. I didn't think it was egregious. I'll say that. I didn't think there was anything egregious about any of that stuff. It was not. It was nothing like, say, the New Orleans Rams game. And Rob, appreciate the call, but it was nothing like the Rams. Non-call of DPI in New Orleans in the NFC Championship game a year ago, which is very nearly just the game goes to the other team as a result of that.
This is...
all right, guys, I appreciate it. You go have a good one.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
I can understand if you're an Ohio State fan how you could be incredibly mad.
Crushed. They were the better team. That's what's frustrating, I think, to Ohio State fans. If you watch the game, I think Ohio State is better than Clemson in that game, yet they lost.
The national perception of Clemson has to be one of the most fascinating things in the world right now.
Yep, physics.
They are the defending national champs, and they're undefeated, and everybody thinks that they're not as good as a lot of other teams. Not a lot, a handful of other teams. That's crazy.
Yeah,
they beat Alabama multiple times.
Yeah,
in the national championship on the big stage. That's in the national playoffs. That's crazy. My whole stance on all this sort of stuff is that you can never, like all coaches say, you can never control what's going to happen to you. You can only control how you respond.
Mm-hmm.
Bad calls are going to happen all over the place. There are singular plays that happen all over the place. You never know when you might get held on the backside, and it allows a big kick return that then sparks. Whatever happens, there might be a no call. It's all sorts all over the place. These bang bang plays that are then put under scrutiny of HD TV replay. I think it's just such a tenuous situation, but. Even after all the stuff that happened to Ohio State happens, don't give up a 94-yard drive.
Totally.
You have the ball last. Score.
Don't throw an interception. Yeah.
And I get it's kids, and that's why college football is so fascinating, because these are kids. And when they do have a bad play go there in the wrong way, and it's a bad call, and everybody knows it, it's way harder for young men to respond. You're just so emotional. But at the end of the day, I never think that one play impacts everything more than anything else. Especially when it comes to a call.
Lawrence ran for 67 yards and a touchdown on one play, and then they went 94 yards in 4 plays. And then we're behind and took the lead. That's the game right there.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about how the game went? That's where the game went. That was an epic football game, though. Just from a fan or enjoyment of football, that's as good as it gets. If we could get something like that in the national championship, unbelievable.
Yep.
All right, that took our time up. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We may get to some football. We do got to talk some basketball, though, because game number 2 of the conference slate is tipping off in just over an hour from now in both, all over the conference, but in Missoula and Bozeman in particular. So we'll get to all of that right after this. Hey, it's a new year soon. With all the resolutions, one of the best things you can do is start by cleaning. A clean environment will help inspire you to do great things. Start fresh and clean inside your car. Take pride in your ride and schedule a full interior detail with Shine Auto Detailing. Most of their clients say that they make their car cleaner than it was when it was new. Schedule online at shineautodetailing.net. Mention you heard it with Ryan and Coulter. That's us, Tutel and Nuanez. They'll give you a $20 winter windshield treatment for free for safer driving in the winter. How about that? So tell them you heard it here. Over at shineautodetailing.net, you can get your winter windshield treatment for free. Go online right now, shineautodetailing.net, shineautodetailing.net to schedule. Thank you for making Polaris America's best-selling off-road brand. During the Polaris Great American Thank You event, financing is as low as 3.99% and rebates go as high as $3,500. Live life wide open in a high-performance RZR. Tackle everything from mountains to mud holes in a legendary Sportsman ATV. Get more done with a hard-working Ranger or elevate your adventure in a versatile Polaris General. Now is the time to get the season's best deals on America's best-selling off-road lineup with financing as low as 3.99% APR for 36 months and rebates up to $3,500 during the Polaris Great American Thank You at Kurtz Polaris, 2904 West Broadway in Missoula and Highway 83 in Sealy. All the best machines, gear, apparel, and accessories to enjoy winter this year are at Kurtz. Go check out their 2020 snowmobile inventory right now and all the clothing, helmets, gloves, hats, and jackets to keep you safe, warm, and looking great at Kurtz Polaris and KurtzPolaris.com. Rebates valid in U.S. through 12/31/19 on new 2016 through 2020 vehicles. Subject to credit approval. Offers vary by model. See dealer for details. Always wear a helmet. Never drink and ride.
This is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
At Florence Coffee Company, we invite you to try our extraordinary drip coffee. Our drip coffee is made from our signature blend, which is a medium roast, bold but very smooth, representing Indonesia, Central and South America. Florence Coffee Co. promises satisfaction in every cup of this perfect blend of the highest quality beans available. Stop by and try a cup today and visit us at FlorenceCoffeeCo.com.
Experience matters. Walk into any Farmer State Bank to learn just how much. You'll find an experienced staff of professionals ready and willing to go the extra mile to help you succeed. Bank on the go with mobile and internet banking solutions, or enjoy our legendary personal service face-to-face in the lobby. Visit farmersebank.com or a location near you to learn more. Farmer State Bank, your Montana bank since 1907, member FDIC.
The biggest season in sports is shifting into overdrive, and the Desperado Sports Tavern has the fuel you need to make it to the finish line. By now, you've heard that the Despo serves the best wings around, but did you know they have a full menu with burgers, nachos, chicken strips, sandwiches, cheese sticks, and even steaks? Fill your tank, then wash it down with an ice-cold beverage or two. Keep your head in the game with 32 HD TVs and room for the whole crew. The Desperado Sports Tavern on South Russell across from the Y.
Tutel and Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Missoula.
Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, SWX Montana Television. Great to be with all of you out in the wider world. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, online at KurtzPolaris.com. If you missed anything in the show, you can check it out on the podcast. Podcast available wherever you get your podcasts. It's there thanks to the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel. Coulter, the Montana Grizzlies, Montana State Bobcats are collectively 4-0 between their men's and women's teams in Big Sky Conference basketball. The men started off in the state of Montana at home to start their conference slate. Montana State beating Sacramento State 66-51, who had a really impressive, actually, non-conference, one of the better non-conference sort of schedules and results of any of the Big Sky Conference teams.
Yeah, 7-2.
And so for Montana State to win handily, holding Sacramento State to under 35%, impressive. I know you were in the barn for that game, and you and I will both be at Dahlberg Arena tonight for you get to see Sacramento State 2 games in a row. How about that, Coulter, against the Montana Grizzlies? And then the Grizz behind early, behind, in fact, for most of 23 minutes out of a possible 40 in this game, but used a 15-2 run about 5 minutes into the second half to propel them to a lead. Saeed Pridgett, absolutely phenomenal in this game, 27 points leading the way. Kendall Manuel adding 16 as well, 6 for 6 from the line for Kendall Manuel in particular. And they find a way, particularly defensively, to hold a team to 2 points to go on a 15-2 run and then hold off Northern Arizona and get a big win to start your conference slate off right. Look, man, right now it's completely up for grabs in the Big Sky Conference. Nobody knows anybody who's good, who's not good, whatever. Got to win your home games. Got to win your home games. And Montana State both did it well, and now they'll switch opponents tonight. Northern Arizona in Bozeman and Sacramento State in Missoula.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get too ahead of yourself because I do think that Sac State and NAU are definitely going to be bottom half of the league across the board, men's and women's.
Yeah.
All 4 of those squads are going to be bottom half of the league. But if you want to be top half of the league, you got to beat those teams, especially on your home court.
Right.
And it's always good wins, no matter what. I mean, if you watched any part of the Lady Grizz game, like Tom Stage, the play-by-play guy for the Lady Grizz, said, you could bowl in this arena. You could set up pins at the end of the aisle, bowl it on down because there's nobody in there.
Yeah.
And so you're playing in a cavernous football dome in front of no one. Sometimes that is as big of a home court advantage as you can get, especially if you're a Lady Grizz team that's used to playing in front of 2,500, 3,000 all the time. So it's a good win for Lady Grizz to go to NAU and get that win. It's also good. I mean, Sac State on the women's side, I think it's pretty tried and true now that Bunkie Harkleroad has definitely the most unique style in the league, maybe in the country.
Certainly has the most unique name.
And he just hasn't recruited very well. When he first took that job over and he had players like Fantasia Hilliard and Maran Johnson, Sac State was so dangerous. And now their stated goals are to shoot 53s, 100 3-pointers, force 30 turnovers, and
is it 50 or 100?
Shoot 53s, shoot 100 field goals,
100 field goals, gotcha.
And force 30 turnovers and get 45% of the offensive rebounds. So all they're doing is jacking and crashing the glass, and if you get a layup, they'll trade you 3s for 2s, and oftentimes if they shoot 53s, they're going to make 15 to 20 of them, and you might get 20 free layups. Well, now, like, they shot like less than 20% in the second half of that game, and Montana State wins by 40.
Yeah.
And so it's a flawed style for sure, but make no mistake, it's hard to prepare for. So to get off to the conference start,
it's the triple option of basketball.
It is kind of, no doubt. But then on the men's side, the Grizz, this team's going to be so hard to judge for a long time because when I watch them, they have talent. They do. They just don't know how to play together yet. But that's a good step to get a victory. But NAU's been a bottom dweller, and they have a new head coach. We'll see what they do against Sac State tonight because Sac State, they don't have Marcus Graves, and that's huge. But I thought that in Bozeman Saturday, I was there for the game, and a couple of impressions. First of all, Brian Katz is a really good coach, and he gets his guys to play hard. And he knows what he has at his disposal.
And he has had success in Dahlberg Arena.
No doubt. And he's had success against the Grizz, period. I mean, the Grizz had one of the biggest monkeys on Travis DeCuire's back for a long time was winning at Sac State. They had a hard time winning at Sac State.
Yep.
Sac State's 2 best guys are almost always 2 of the best guys in the league. They have a hard time filling in everything else. But whether you're talking about Mike McKinney, who was the league MVP back in 2014, or Dylan Garrity, or Justin Strings, and then last year's Marcus Graves and Josh Patton. Now they only have Josh Patton. But Patton is definitely, I'd say the 3 best big guys in the league are Josh Patton from Sac State, Mason Peatling from Eastern Washington, and the guy who announced himself to the rest of the league on Saturday, and that's Jabril Bello from Montana State. Patton feasted in the first half. He was 5 of 5 from the floor. He had 16 points at halftime. He was doing whatever he wanted, catching it. Montana State was throwing a bunch of freshmen at him. He was just eating. I mean, he was doing whatever he wanted. Well, then in the second half, they put Bello on him. It was not just Bello switching on to guard Patton, because a lot of times they're actually running the zone. He was on the other side. They had Bello pin Patton on the block and go at him, and he got him into foul trouble. Patton's the best shot blocker in the league, no question. And he had 2 resounding blocks that looked like they could give Sac State some momentum. But then they dumped it to Bello. Drop step, finish. Drop step, finish. They got a couple fouls, and then all of a sudden Patton has to lay off, and Bello scored 10 of his 18 after halftime. ends up battling Patton to a draw. They both had 18 points. And I thought it was a pretty resounding announcement by Balo that he is a real deal big guy in this league. So, yeah, I don't think that as far as the men go, I don't think NAU or Sac State are going to be that much of a threat in the league this year. But I'll be really interested to see tonight because twofold. Sac plays one of the slowest paces in the country. They want to slow it down. They want to grind you. They're big. Montana's not. So how does Montana guard Patton? What's their answer for that? And how do they handle maybe not getting out of running? Because Sac State wants you to make mistakes, and Montana has a lot of young guys that are prone to make mistakes. So it'll be an intriguing matchup. But as every coach is going to tell us throughout the next 10 weeks, this is a straight marathon. 20 conference games is an astounding amount of conference games. So winning one, losing one, who knows? I think it's going to come down to this league race is going to come down to how well do you respond after a loss?
What record do you think the best team in the conference is going to have conference record when it's all said and done?
Oh, man, that's an interesting question because I think that the 20-game conference schedule, it almost caters to like a guaranteed 2 losses. You just never know. You never know when you're just going to stub your toe or get a bad crew. Or
and if you're a 2-loss team, you are dominant, simply dominant in conference.
Think about how good Montana was last year.
And
they went 16-4.
I don't see that. You know,
well, that's what I'm saying. Montana was so good last year, and they still went 16-4 because you never know when you have to play Northern Colorado on a Monday 2 days after Cat Grizz. Well, and you never know when you have to go on some weird swing.
There are a couple, I won't call them scheduled losses, but every team is going to have 2 games where it sets up for them to be such a harder game than just playing the team at the place. You know,
right.
And they played Northern Colorado, who they beat in Missoula by like 4 points or something like that, because they were playing their 3rd game in 7 days, and Northern Colorado was coming off like a 9-day bye. They were off for almost a week and a half. Then when they had it even and they went to Northern Colorado and they hammered Northern Colorado in the second game in Greeley. But that's the type of stuff that the schedule sort of dictates, because it is, even though it's balanced in the sense that you play a round robin, you play everybody twice, the way that it happens is very, very hard, and it's very sort of what do I want to say, imbalanced, asymmetric, whatever, how you want to talk about it. So that is I think 15-5 could get it done.
Oh, totally. Oh, no. I mean, 14 even.
Yeah, 14-6, 15-5.
I mean, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer as we're on the eve of, we're about to go to Dahlberg Arena for our first conference game, but just objectively, the league is down on both sides.
Yeah.
And maybe that can prove me wrong, but there's just, on both sides of the men and the women the last 3 years, there's been an exceptional group of talent. I mean, you've had some of the greatest players in the history of the league, from Bogdan Blizniak and Jake Wiley at Eastern Washington to Jordan Davis at Northern Colorado to Tyler Hall at Montana State to the great group of Grizz seniors from last year. Those guys are all generational type players, and they were all playing at the same time. I mean, even a guy like Justin Strings could never even get a sniff on first team all league, and Justin Strings is ridiculous.
He's really good, yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
And from Sac State. And on the women's side, I mean, 3 of the 5 most prolific scorers in the history of the league, Savannah Smith at Northern Colorado, Taylor Pierce, and Michaela Ferenz at Idaho, they were all in the same class. But then you also had that great class from Portland State that went to the tournament, Sydney Riley and Courtney West and Ashley Bolston. This is the most fun part about college sports, though. Who emerges? Who's the guy? I mean, we know some of the names. We know Harold Frey at Montana State. We know Syed Pridgett at Montana. We know Mason Peatling at Eastern Washington. We know Jarek Harding at Weber State. We know Jonah Radabot at Northern Colorado. But who's the guy who comes out of nowhere and you're like, whoa, who's that guy? Jacob Davison was that guy last year at Eastern Washington. Mm-hmm. Who becomes that player? It'll be interesting to watch, because I do think of all these 4 in-state squads, the Montana State women, they have the most established players, but everybody else, they have a chance to have real breakout players, and it'll be interesting to see who evolves into that.
It's Tutel Nuanez, boys and girls. It's been a fun Monday show. I want to remind you now, we're not going to be on the air tomorrow, and we will not be on the air on New Year's Day. Enjoy the bowl games, okay? Enjoy the New Year's games. We'll be back with you on Tuesday and on throughout to usher in 2020. But it's been a very fun 2019. Coulter, appreciate you. David, welcome to the fray, my friend. And to all of you out there listening, day in, day out, week in, week out, we appreciate all of you. And thanks for being here, making this thing go, which you do every time. We send you out to the Orange Bowl. Florida is playing Virginia. Florida is a 16-point favorite in the Orange Bowl in Miami at the Hard Rock Stadium. Coulter, who do you like in this thing?
Man, I had no idea Virginia was good at football until about a month ago, because they've been going through it, right?
Well, don't tell the Long family. Chris Long, Virginia grad, buddy.
I got the Gators.
Do you have them covering?
Yeah.
21-point deal?
Yeah.
I like the Florida Gators. Dan Mullen's getting it done. I'm with you on this. Boys and girls, enjoy the Orange Bowl on ESPN Radio. We'll see you Thursday. In Western Montana, we know shopping local matters. And you may think you'd pay more for the quality and customer service that comes with it, but